give me just a moment, is I am going to share first where I heard this earlier from the New Catacombs on the X app. Bishop Andrei of Roca, that's Roca with Andrei Andronic, in communion with the Serbian True Orthodox. We often call them ROCANA here. Has released a statement in response to the recent ROCOR statement regarding the MP. And the New Catacombs, if you're not following him, or I guess it's a him, or it could be a her, I think it's a him. The point is, if you're not following them on X, you really should be. They are a great source of news and information. But at the bottom of this is the link to the original. And this is the auroca.org website. It's the Diocese of Australia, New Zealand under Bishop Andrei. And so this is in Russian, but of course I am going to read it in English. And it says, recently something new and unexpected has happened, which of course aroused the interest of many, namely the Synod of ROCOR-MP published a statement by the Synod of Bishops on the renewal of 20th century ideologies. Give me just a moment here. And I will get right back to reading that. Give me a moment. Which contains criticism of the current Russian government. The ROCOR Synod dared to raise up its voice, protesting against the emerging in Russia return to the false God-opposing ideology that prevailed in the last century. As examples of such a return, the Synod points to the restoration of monuments to Stalin and Dzerzhinsky in Moscow, as well as the recent de-rehabilitation of those condemned in the Stalin era. In conclusion, the Synod reminds us that the Church abroad has always been, quote, free of connections to any state and fearlessly proclaimed the simple and pure truth of Holy Orthodoxy. Now, I do like that in this, they included a nice photo there of Patriarch Alexei and Metropolitan Lawrence, who signed the Union of 2007, thus kind of undermining the fact that they claim they've been free of connections to any state. You're kind of not free of connections to any state. Indeed, the ROCOR was free before its unification of the MP, which not only connected to the Russian state, but also is totally controlled and subservient to state authorities. This is why the statement by the ROCOR Synod came as such a surprise to everyone. That after the union of the MP, the clergy of the ROCOR immediately became silent and submissive and never openly criticized the Russian authorities. However, their present statement is by no means a fearless proclamation of a simple and pure truth, because it is inconsistent, incomplete, and obviously timid. In the restoration of monuments to Stalin and Dzerzhinsky, the Synod sees a rising tendency to whitewash the crimes of the God-fighting regime of the 20th century. Undoubtedly, this is true. But sadly, the Synod kept silent about the fact that the current Russian regime is a direct continuation of the same God-fighting regime of the 20th century. That the criminal organization created by Stalin and Dzerzhinsky is alive and is well the backbone of the current Russian state. That this regime is essentially a mafia group that has seized power in Russia. That this criminal regime has been waging a bloody, destructive, and at the same time completely aimless war against the Orthodox people of Ukraine for the 4th year, and that hundreds of thousands of people, both Ukrainians and Russians, have died and continue to die because of this. It would also be necessary to point out that the leadership of the MP not only supports this fratricidal war, but also sacralizes it, forcing all priests to read a prayer in which this war is given a sacred character. The Synod also, in its statement, points to the outrageous facts of the cancellation of the rehabilitation of some persons unjustly convicted during the Stalin years and rehabilitated after Stalin's death. It is good that the Synod, quote-unquote, raised its voice in defense of the innocent, who after temporary rehabilitation were again declared criminals. Undoubtedly, these facts point to the tightening of the regime in Russia. But after all, these people died a long time ago. It would be far more important to raise their voices in defense of the thousands of innocent people who are now suffering in Russian prisons under torture conditions. Russian courts sentenced to long prison terms for the slightest manifestation of disagreement with the policy of the authorities, for a private conversation, for a post on Facebook. The ROCOR Synod should also raise its voice in defense of the MP priests who refused to read the Patriarch's sacrilegious prayer and were defrocked by the church court because of this as violators of the canons. The ROCOR Synod does not see the elephant in the room. It strains the gnat and devours the camel, Matthew 23:24. It protests against the renewal of the ideologies of the past, but is silent of the crimes of the current regime, which are being committed before everyone's eyes. The church is the bearer of truth because the spirit of truth abides in her. The church is the salt of the earth. If the word of truth is not heard in the church, it will not be heard anywhere. But if the salt loses its savor, how will you make it salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out to be trampled underfoot by men. Matthew 5:13. That's signed Bishop Andrei. And Lord have mercy. I had no idea they were doing the China thing in Russia too. That's actually terrible. So it's a shame that I did not even realize they're jailing people for Facebook posts now in Russia. What is this, China? Well,